This morning, listeners, we are in the aftermath of the opening contribution to the 2025-26 budget debate in the Parliament. Our finance minister, Jamaica's first woman finance minister, the Honorable Fayval Williams, took to her feet last afternoon and held court in the Parliament. As some in the streets would say, she come out and she go on with herself. The finance minister, listeners, did not disappoint. There are many observers, quite frankly, who would consider Fayval Williams, in respect of her maiden contribution to the budget debate, yes, having regard to her incarnation as our first woman finance minister, overshot the anticipation and the expectations of many. She delivered, and she delivered well. Fayval Williams is not someone who you would expect to regale you and make a presentation laden with theatrics, style, and bombast and flair. She is not of that ilk. But what I particularly like about Fayval is that she makes no pretenses. She doesn't seek to be what she's not. She's a steady operator, a seamless operator, but above all, a high capacity, competent operator. And that's what I like about her. She does her own thing in her own unique style. And yesterday, she punctuated the presentation with appropriate injections of levity, punches, as it were, swipes at the members across the aisle, her government's opponents, and it was good. It was very good. My own score, and I'm one who marks very hard, is a 7.5 on 10, going to 8 on 10. And I would give her 8 on 10, particularly for the substance. Substance matters. For some operators and some observers, they are big on form and a lot of flair and theatrics. And that is good for viewership, and that is good for, the persons looking on, and you want to have elements in a presentation that will keep you gripped to your devices or your television sets as you sit at home and watch. Yeah? But for me, I'm big on substance. I do have an appreciation for style and presence. But we got elements of several things last afternoon. But separate and apart from the 8 on 10, the 7.5 to 8 out of 10 that I would give the finance minister, what I'm delighted about is that for her, it can only and will only get better from here. It is to Jamaica's credit and delight that what we saw in the Parliament last afternoon was the presentation of the 9th consecutive budget where there is no new taxes. We celebrate that, listeners, because in Jamaica's contemporary political history, this has not always been the case. When Omar Davies would take to his feet year after year Yes? Taxes would be the order of the day. So much so that businesses and households alike would quiver in their boots, engulfed and overwhelmed by anxiety and trepidation, fear, literally, because you would be anticipating tax measures, new taxes. You'll be anticipating new taxes, as Omar would have sought to raise money to finance the budgets that he would have presented. Of course, some of those budgets would have been adversely impacted by the run with it culture. So the Finance Minister, Fayval Williams, when you consider the presentation she made yesterday, went about in her own way setting the record straight. She began, for the most part, by locating in the ensuing debate, the discussion, her own treatise on where Jamaica and its finances is. She started with an outline of the fiscal discipline that is being maintained. And it was appropriate for her to do so because, among other things, she took the opportunity to telegraph to stakeholders, the Jamaican people, and observers around the world that whilst the erstwhile and venerable Nigel Clark has moved on from serving as Jamaica's finance minister, Jamaica remains in good hands. Jamaica is in steady hands, and I believe it is a credit to Prime Minister Andrew Holness this morning. It is a credit to the Jamaica Labour Party, of which he is a part and that he leads, that its roster, its team of men and women can be of such that, yes, you have been able to have a successor to Nigel Clark that is her own person, but equally capable, equally competent, equally qualified, and quite frankly, delivered in much the same way as Nigel Clark came to have delivered over the past 6 or so years as finance minister. What we saw yesterday was good for Jamaica because it suggests and speaks to policy continuity and a commitment to the maintenance of responsibility and fiscal discipline in the management and stewardship of this nation's affairs. I'm particularly delighted, listeners, at the resilience that Jamaica's economy now boasts. I'm delighted also at the fact that even at the level of households, particularly some of our more vulnerable households, that there are efforts being expended to build resilience there. I make mention in this case of what is dubbed the micro-insurance legislation that is going to be developed and brought to the fore. Because what microinsurance means and what microinsurance solutions entail is that this is an insurance product which is essentially accessed by low-income earners who are unable to access traditional insurance solutions because they cannot afford the prohibitive premiums. So, as a quick takeaway, one of the scenarios on the table at present is that folks here in Jamaica may be able to pay a 250 Jamaican dollars insurance premium monthly for a potential benefit, for a benefit of 500,000 Jamaican dollars. So you pay $250 per month, and in the event of making a call, making a claim on the insurance, the payout would be 500,000 Jamaican dollars at the rate of $250 per month. You cannot think of a better deal than that. You cannot think of a better way of mainstreaming ordinary Jamaican households and working class Jamaicans, poor Jamaicans even, than that. As I sat in the well of the Parliament last afternoon, listeners, and I listened to Fayval in a very workmanlike way, making her presentation in a very workmanlike manner, a certain picture began to emerge for me. Last afternoon, what we saw was a coherent, well thought out, sober, and no-nonsense outline of an assault on some of the hurdles to doing business in Jamaica. Yes, an assault on some of the barriers and hurdles to unlocking this country's growth potential by facilitating enterprise in a much more meaningful and concerted way. And I believe that was a fundamental takeaway, a good takeaway from the budget. And I think it is to the finance minister's credit, to her, the team she leads, and of course the government as a whole, that throughout the presentation you saw and heard an assault on the hurdles and barriers to doing business in the country. The proposed SLB reform, and I should really properly put it as continued SLB reform, because with the removal of the guarantor requirement for SLB borrowers last year, and that followed, of course, the prior year, where the guarantor requirement was removed for path beneficiaries, and the year before that, the guarantor requirement was removed. Educational supplies, a laptop, and meal support, meal solutions, bringing that under one umbrella in terms of an SLB loan, because the truth is, for many of us who have attended tertiary institutions and would have pursued higher education, we know how prohibitive the attendant costs can be as you pursue higher education. So school fee is one thing, but for many Jamaican households, the cost of housing, when a youngster has to move up from Northern Clarendon, Portland, elsewhere across rural Jamaica, yes, to come and take up a place here at the university and live in the city so that they can be in proximity to school or live on the campus here. The cost of rent, the cost of housing can be prohibitive. And to the extent that you are now addressing housing, books and supplies, providing a laptop, because what is university life these days without access to a personal computer, a laptop, and of course meals, because as you know, people don't necessarily do so well on hungry belly. That is game changing in my view. The proposals as it relates to fostering greater levels of productivity in the public sector are also welcomed, because the finance minister is Minister of Finance and the Public Service. So I'm delighted that you took some time at the wicket to unpack some of the government's thoughts and proposals and what will be done in relation to making our public sector even more efficient, effective, fit for purpose, and productive. The pathway to legal electricity supply is also a development that I welcome. I welcome it because I am particularly mindful of the hazards, the safety hazards that illegal electricity connection, illegal throw-ups present. Every so often, we see news coming across our devices or newscasts on mainstream media about a man who was picking ackee and he got electrocuted. Yeah? Every so often, you hear of a house, a dwelling that got engulfed in flames, burned to the ground. Unfortunately, occupants lost their lives in that fire because of throw-ups, illegal throw-ups in terms of electricity. So those things are great. So the finance minister's first good news was in relation to the budgetary support to the various ministries, departments, and agencies for road work, police stations, irrigation equipment to boost and facilitate our farmers in terms of their production. The expansion of water infrastructure to bring piped water to more households across the country. Housing, hospitals, and of course, retro payments for certain categories of government workers. Her second good news was what I touched on earlier, the sweeping reforms for SLB borrowers. Her third good news was the $2 billion to the DBJ for on lending to MSMEs. Her fourth good news, increase in the GCT threshold for MSMEs from 10 million to 15 million Jamaican dollars. Good news number 5 was the accelerated capital allowance for any sized business, a business of any size. Good news number 6 was the launch of the micro market on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. We have the regular stock exchange, a junior stock exchange, and for those entities that are going to be at 10 million but below 50 million, there's a micro market being developed for them. And of course, as you know, the stock exchange means patient capital. Good news number 7 was a dividend-paying investment opportunity through Trans-Jamaica Highway and the initial public offering that is, well, it's not an IPO, it's an additional opportunity because there was a TJH offering some time ago. Good news number 8 was the reduced tax rate on dividends received by non-resident companies from 33.33% to 15%. Good news number 9 was a reduced tax rate on dividends received by non-resident individuals from 25% to 15%. Good news number 10 was more good news, but stay tuned. We will return with the more good news, picking up at good news number 11 so soon as we return from the break. Good news number 11 is that there is no cost to persons who are seeking to regularize their electricity supply for the wiring of their house. Good news number 12, you will incur no cost for the inspection. Good news number 13, and this one is major. There is a credit of 4,000 Jamaican dollars toward the electricity bill of prepaid JPSCO customers who seek to take up this opportunity, and that will persist for 6 months. So for 6 months, prepaid JPSCO customers will receive 4,000 Jamaican dollars toward their bill. Good news number 14, to the extent that you are a regularized JPSCO customer, you will not have to be subject to the indignity and the vagaries of being pursued by the police, for example, in relation to your illegal throw-ups. So you know, if you're a scamper about the place and take away yourself, yeah, the police won't be running you down, or you know, you won't have to be embarrassed by JPSCO enforcement teams who are seeking to cauterize illegal throw-ups. Good news number 15. Buy electricity. Yes, you'll be able to purchase electricity when you need it, as you need it, and in the amount that you can afford to do so. Whether it is $1,000, $500, you name it. It depends on your own usage and your ability to afford it. So that is good news number 15, which is welcomed, quite frankly. Good news number 16 is that a tax office will be open in every parish on a Saturday. That is in a bid, of course, to better facilitate persons, primarily working persons, as they seek to transact business with Tax Administration Jamaica. So at present, we know the tax office outside of the one in Portmore. I know that most of them tend to be closed on a Saturday, as they do business Monday through Friday. But on a Saturday, or at least on one Saturday, a tax office in every parish will be open to facilitate you, the members of the public, as you transact business. Good news number 17 is that there will be a concerted effort to build out access to automated banking, and essentially, good news number 17 is that an ATM machine will be brought closer to you. That's good news number 17. Another good news is the PAYE threshold, the income tax threshold. When the Holiness-led Jamaica Labour Party government took office in March 2016, the income tax threshold was 592,000 Jamaican dollars. 592,000 Jamaican dollars. At present, our income tax threshold is approximately 1.7 million Jamaican dollars. Based on the announcement by the Finance Minister last afternoon in the Parliament, our income tax threshold will be increased to $2 million from the $1.7 million at which it currently stands. So just to be clear, commencing in April of 2025 here, the income tax threshold will be increased on a phased basis over a couple of years, over a few years, till we get to the 2 million by April of 2027. So in commencing April 2025, the income tax threshold will move from 1.7, the current 1.7, to 1.8. April 2026, from 1.8 to 1.9. And April 2027, 1.9 to the 2 million mark. Those who may come and seek to criticize should appreciate that in March 2016, the income tax threshold was 592,000. So essentially, about $1.3 million would have been added by the time we get to April 2027 by the holiness-led administration of which Fayval Williams is a member.